they're better pollinators than
Yeah.
honeybees.
They're colder weather pollinators,
Mhm.
which is better for our climate.
I've never heard of that.
Oh.
They'll work
Well,
in
I've
the
heard
colder.
mason bees, but not that you can go down the hardware store and buy them.
Yeah. You can get ladybugs too.
I knew that.
I don't have to buy those, I got those.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you want some, you can come to our house.
Yeah, it's come out the window.
Or bats.
Oh, God.
They like under the shingles.
Yeah. We got plenty of those.
Well, it's 6 p.m. I'd like to welcome everyone. Call the meeting to order. Again with the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we gather on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically Nooksack and Lummi tribes who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. On behalf of everyone here, we want to express our deepest respect and gratitude for our indigenous neighbors, the Nooksack and Lummi tribes, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. And next up is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Any changes?
No changes to the agenda.
In that case, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Motion to approve agenda as written. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is good of the order.
Okay, I have several items here. I want to start with classes dismissed for our retirees. We just had a little get together with them, and I just wanted to publicly thank them for their 159 years of being in schools, which is pretty good for them. And to announce who they are. So David Lewis and Paula Conrad Graham, Anne Marie Hinterly, Marty Cunningham, Susan Fuller Kelly, and Cindy Lawrence. And Marty, they're all going out in style, but Marty and Susan actually are going out with some major awards around Spark and the Education and Excellence Awards and things. I mean, it's pretty awesome to have a career and then go out on top like that. And they're all going out on top. But I just thought we'd mention that. Also, I mentioned yesterday in the community update, end of the year field trips. This is a fun part of the year for the kids. One of my favorite parts of the year. Kids get to go on field trips and to the beaches, into the mountains, into geology trips, and they're doing fun games and all that kind of stuff. And it's just part of being a kid in school, and it creates memories. Graduation on the 6th. I think you've talked to Tammy a little bit, whether you're gonna put a gown on and walk out with the kids. It's always fun to do that. I highly recommend that you do that if you haven't done that. Pride presentations tomorrow at the school. I don't know if it's too late to sign up, but I'm sure we can get you in if you're not. 7th grade orientation is tonight. That's right over here going on right now. We have state athletes. We have our softball team that's on their way to Richland. They're probably there already and maybe even playing a game. And track team is in Yakima. And I wanted to highlight 2 of our track students with developmental disability. That's Gibson Lewis and Christopher Sierra. Why don't you come on up, Ian, and talk a little bit about these kids, because you know them. They're participating in the shot javelin 100, and Ian, tell us a little bit about who they are.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful thing to see an inclusion-based model being so successful here at Baker. Is something we prided ourselves in for a long time. And we have 2 students with developmental disabilities who have persevered through being part of the sport, have learned to be a part of a different component of the school community. Sports brings that out in us, and it's a great opportunity for them it's been a great opportunity for them to grow, and their hard work has resulted in qualification to go to state. And so they're competing on Friday and Saturday. Gibson's going to be competing in shot put, and Christopher will be competing in javelin, shot put, and the 100-yard dash. And just heard a little bit from Jeff, the track coach, and it's just been a really great experience for kind of everybody involved. And I need to acknowledge both his teachers and the paras that have supported them while they're in track all this entire time as well, and going to meets. And it's just the sign of our success and what we do here at Baker. And it's wonderful to see Gibson and Christopher be a part of it and be so successful. So they'll be competing against other kids with developmental disabilities, and we'll see how they do on Friday and Saturday.
They're all
It's
winners.
just cool. It's just great. Yeah, it's really wonderful to share these kind of stories.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I recently talked with Gibson's mother and she's very proud.
Yes, yes.
Very cool. And the last thing I have is the FFA, 24 teams, first place upstate. I mean, the kids, they just do an amazing job. And it's got it. I think I've learned, I think it's the premier FFA program in the state. So, and I've had some experience with FFA over a lot, but these guys, they're really good at it. And I know we're gonna have two of our best come up and give a presentation. So I think that's part of the good of the order as well. So Tori and Dylan will be up here in a few minutes. So anyway, that's
Well,
all I have.
Well, thank you very much. And that is our next item is presentation about Baker ASP. So you can welcome to come up and sit here in the chairs.
Right here.
And thank you so much for coming, by the way. I know you are busy in your afternoons and evenings, so we very much appreciate you coming.
Okay, so this is our ASB presentation of our budget for next year. My name is Tori Favreau and I am this year's vice president of ASB. I'm on behalf of this year's exec board.
And then my name is Dylan Kelspeak, and I am next year's treasurer, and I'm here representing next year's exec board. So the first part of our presentation, we just wanted to review our ASB's mission statement, which is we are servant leaders who will work as a team to make a difference, have fun, revitalize school spirit, and support everyone. We value all people.
So this is our overall perspective that we actually came up with at first last year, and it's kind of like looking on, you kind of see like COVID hit about like that 2020, so coming back from that, we kind of tried to make an outline each year of like our goal. So coming back in the school year of 2021, 2022, we wanted to just establish a sustainable system to get back into the groove of things. And then following year, it was establishing and implementing clear ASB procedures. And then this year it was to get back really in the heart of ASB while continuing to implement those rhythm and routines. And next year, our goal is to continue strong leadership and maintaining specifically a healthy budget.
And then another thing we included is our CARS fundamentals, which is part of the WASBIL manual and our constitution and kind of outlines where our money is directed, our funds. So CARS stands for culture, athletics, recreational, and social. And those are kind of the four categories of where our funds go and kind of just direct what we do with them.
So our student involvement in our budget, ASB is committed to sustaining a healthy budget. Our class will attend important budget meetings. ASB treasurer, which is Dylan for next year, will meet with Ms. Brown and or Mr. Frazier to check up on finances monthly to make sure that we're on the right track and we're all on the same page. Our class will be very mindful of the materials we buy because we've had some financial confusion in the past. We want to really be mindful of that in the following years to come. And all of the spendings will be evaluated by the treasurer and voted on through the impact phase.
And then this is kind of an outline of how general ASB earns its money. So there is the two main categories within the general ASB of sports and then clubs, and those obtain their funds through fundraisers and then also just the general funding from ASB. And then we also get our funds from mainly ASB cards when students buy cards in the beginning of the year, as well as just funding in general. And then that's directed towards dances and activities, decorations, specifically in ASB, and then the other clubs and sports decide what they do with their funds as well.
So the 2024-2025 budget overview. Budgets are drafted and approved by our ASB for all of our active clubs at our school. Budgets drafted and approved by ASB for all of our sports teams, and budgets drafted and approved for our overall general ASB activities.
The overview of the projected budget for next year is attached on this slideshow, and then I have a physical copy right here that is signed by Mr. Durand, and then Mishwak, the ASB advisor. Althea Patterson is our current treasurer, and then the ASB bookkeeper, Deborah Brown. And this kind of outlines the entire budget with the beginning value or the beginning fund balances and the ending, and then as well as the revenue and expenditures, and then has separate pages for individual clubs and specifically what their funds are for. So if any of you would like to look at this, it's available.
Things that we are currently working on right now is closing out inactive accounts, making sure all of our clubs remain in good standing going into the 2024-2025 school year. So that was like going back to paying attention to, the balances that they have and how much money is in and out of their account to make sure that it's all positive. Creating clear systems of communication around ASB funds so that we are all on the same page, going back with Dylan meeting with like Ms. Brown and Mr. Durand, and aligning the funds balance we use with the actual bank statement. Because I know in the past we've had some confusion with that on the different statements, so really getting that down. We would like to shout out Mr. Frazier.
Where's he at?
So great.
Oh, there
He's worked with us quite a bit these past few months and really have helped us tremendously with problems that we've had in the past that we haven't been able to identify at all, but with his help, he was able to nail that down for us.
And now we're going to go into the junior high ASB presentation for their budget, since Mr. Wright cannot be here today. This has events for the entire student body and then was created by their ASB leadership. And then their goal is to operate within this budget, and they're projected to end the year with $44,000 in their general ASB account.
Help us all for the high school and junior high projected next year's balance. Thank you. Well, thank you guys for your time and listening to our presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, board members, questions or comments?
Are there specific things that for sports that the ASB fund goes towards, or just kind of like general, I know we need to hire coaches and.
Yeah, so the sports, each athletic team, like football and volleyball and soccer, they all have their own separate accounts where they do like the fundraising and that goes towards. But it comes out of, from my understanding, Coach Lepp deals with their like budgeting for all of the money towards like refs and coaches and all that stuff. And so we've helped out a little bit this year and may possibly help out next year with other funds regarding
Thank
like
you.
regarding referees.
Yeah,
So yeah,
okay.
but it's not a typical thing. Like
Right.
we've never done it in my high school, but we did it a little bit this year. And then looking at our budget, we're gonna see what we can do for next year.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What are some of the events that ASB sponsored this year, like dances or things like that? Just to get an idea.
Yeah, so we've done prom, polo. We actually this year what we added was a winter formal. So we normally don't do like a dance kind of in between was it homecoming and Tolo. But this year it was around winter break and we decided to throw like a winter formal, so it was also gave a chance for underclassmen to get dressed up, in formal dresses, not just as juniors and seniors. So that was something we put on.
Yeah, those are really the major aspects. And then the only one I can really think of is fundraisers like Coaches versus Cancer, or I know we've done like Powder Pop before, and like those activities that are in like the spring.
Yeah.
And our plan right now is to continue doing most of those, continuing those next year, including this.
Thank you both for all your hard work, and that builds such good community for the students in the school to have those activities and things to look forward to. So thank you for giving me a little idea of what it looks like. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? So what clubs are currently active?
Oh, we actually just have a new club that joined on like May 15th.
So this has
Oh, yeah, I think
the clubs that are listed on here are our ASB general, so that would be like our activities that we do in our group. And then we have the drama department, the International Thespian Society, which is the new group that Tori was talking about. And that's kind of a offshoot of the drama department. It's kind of a separate organization. And then we also have choir, bands, QSA, the yearbook, FFA, cheer, and then football, basketball, baseball, track, cross country, softball, volleyball, wrestling, and then soccer and golf.
And I am impressed. I did look over your the fund balances and impressed with and it's good to hear your management of those too. I think that's paying attention to those is critical. Impressed with the fund balances, and I think the junior high has about what we might end up with at the year. So
Yeah.
that's pretty strong. And okay, so I do you anticipate in looking at your funding, anticipating changes going forward, you're gonna be treasurer this upcoming year. Do you anticipate any changes in regard to that?
In regard to how we manage.
Yeah, how you manage it, and also, so in regard to the fund balance, balancing fund balance with your expenses.
Yes, that's definitely a thing that our thing that we've set as a goal for each year, especially in like ASB as just like its own separate thing. And then our goal for the next year is kind of to continue that, as well as working with the clubs to really focus on that and paying a lot of attention. I'm also the next year's treasurer for FFA, and they do a very good job of that. And then the treasurer for International Thespian Society as well. So one of the biggest things is just making sure that the advisors and the students within these clubs are paying attention to how they use the funds that are available to them. I think a lot of the student body, especially those that are active in these clubs, understand that those resources are very precious to them, and that it's very it's a very big gift to them that they're able to do these types of things. So I think going into next year, just overall making sure that we're projecting our revenues and our expenditures to be equal, so we don't run into any troubles throughout the next year.
Any further questions? Well, thank you so much for coming, and very good presentation, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
we really appreciate that. So next up is the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda. Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Next up is information from audience. Tammy, do we have anyone signed up?
We have no one signed up.
Anyone in the audience wish to speak? If you want to speak again, you're welcome.
Oh, sorry.
Distracting, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, I will acknowledge that the board received a letter from Tom Larson, which I think you have available. Information from board members. Danielle, will start with you.
I'm gonna have no comment this week.
Ed?
I finally got to see my daughter who's in junior high soccer game this year. Missed a lot of games, been busy working, but finally got to a game this week and it was really cool. See this kid's beautiful day out 2 days ago, so
Nice.
pretty lucky. Yeah, that's it.
Brennan?
Next, let's see. Next Friday, June 7th, I am attending the 39th Annual Woods Tour hosted by the Whatcom Women in Timber. I'm gonna go check that out and that should be fun and I'll let you know how it goes.
Is anyone else signed up? Okay, because I'm signed up too, so we won't have a quorum.
Buddy.
Yeah, right.
I'm
So,
sitting next to you.
yeah. Good. Jason?
Yeah, last night, Phil touched on it. I went to the FFA banquet and to hear all the great accomplishments and all the kids and all the groups, everything from ag mech, forestry, public speaking, marketing, trap shooting, all the stuff they raise and sell and whatnot is really amazing. And the 3 teachers that do that last year, 2 this year, do an amazing job and have the kids are really great at it. And they did a very good surprise Miss Jones with a slideshow at the end of it. And it was really good. They went around and interviewed the kids of their favorite time with her and whatnot. So that was really good. So just a good night with a good group and hearing all their success throughout the year, which was a lot. So that was good.
Well, thank you. I think I had the opportunity yesterday to meet with Chris Rectal and mostly talking about school finances and how we're going to come up with the amount to actually just to bring us even to the cost of inflation over the last couple of years. And he's proposing statewide about $1 billion increase to school funding to accommodate those inflationary costs, and which would need to go through the legislature, obviously. So we'll see it. We'll believe it when we see it. But that would be roughly equal, depending on where it's placed, about $1,000 per student.
Doesn't tax revenue go up with inflation anyway?
Well, and the other part of that is the percentage of the overall budget that has gone to public education has actually diminished over the last several years. So we're becoming a smaller part of the overall state budget, and so I think, you know, there's where the pressure points are. In addition to, you know, how revenue flows this way or that way. So there, at least it gives us our marching orders, and I will. Brian has finished. I think you finished your final draft on.
He did.
You want a couple copies of it? Funding issues. So I think. Are you going to present that to the board today?
I've got a couple copies printed right out here if you want some.
Yeah, maybe when you do your treasurer's report, that could be part of the treasurer's report, and then that'll be part of our presentation. So anyway, that's what I had to comment on. So action items, first up, Phil, is the 24-25 calendar.
Yeah, we have a calendar, similar to what you've passed in previous years. The major change this year, calendar is the late arrival Wednesdays. And I need to give Executive Director Perigo some kudos here and the team that put it together, because it's just not Nick, it's Nick and all of our partners within the school district. So they met several times, came together, put together surveys, got surveys back, got some input, and so this is what they came up with.
You said late arrival?
late arrival,
Yay.
late arrival.
That was nice. Because it was
Early
early.
release.
Yeah.
As opposed to early release.
As opposed, and so that's the major change. The rest of it is, pretty similar to it. When school starts, when school ends, major holidays.
Any questions, comments?
I'm just curious a little bit about the rationale behind that shift.
Yeah, Nick, why don't you come on up? Sure. There was quite a bit of debate around it. So, yeah.
I think before we do that, to frame this, this is a contractually, the unions, I think we've mentioned that before, but I want to reemphasize that maybe you can address that the kind of the context that we're working within contractually in the calendar, with the calendar.
Oh, with the release, the.
Well, not just the release, but
just
the
overall.
overall,
Sure.
that calendar is by law
That's exactly right.
a part of
Yeah.
our
So the-
employment contract.
Yep, so the Public Employees Relation Commission, or PERC, is the organization that oversees labor relations for the state and makes the rules and statutes that we follow during the bargaining process. And they've made it very clear a long time ago that calendar, because it is a workplace, expectation that is by rule has to be bargained. So that is something that we traditionally bargain with our teachers union, and through that, we have a calendar that they have agreed to, and a process that both MBEA and PSE agreed to around what is called the calendar committee, which is a group that grows and shrinks year to year. Sometimes there's people that carry over. This was my second year facilitating that committee. It grew a lot this year. There was, I think, 12 people on it this year, as opposed to like 4 or 5 last year. It's a great group of people. It was a volunteer committee this year. No compensation, so people volunteered their time and really appreciated that. So within that, there was some discussion about that embedded release time for development collaboration, and also just some personal planning time too. What the discussion was, it went a couple different ways. Some people had talked about the potential of moving it to a different day of the week, why Wednesday versus Friday versus, whatever other day. And there's also the discussion of changing it to late arrival. So that's similar to some of our neighboring districts. I believe Cedro does late arrival, as does Meridian. There was original discussion about a Friday late arrival, but then, hearing some thoughts about that, the group decided to go back out to staff and ask them about which day of the week they thought would be best. With that, we landed on Wednesday, and it switched to late arrival for a few reasons. The main one being in support of families, is the group, while the group it was all employees in the group, a lot of them are also parents in the district. And there, as being a parent voice in the room, they felt that, it's easier to delay your work day than to try to get off work earlier, if you have to stay home with your kids. And so the other rationale was the ability of folks to be as attentive as possible for that collaboration and development at the beginning of the day, as opposed to after the student day. And the other piece was transportation. Again, supporting families. Even though it was a consistent Wednesday, the last few years where they released, we still found sometimes that families forgot that there was a different release time, and so it's usually with buses dropping kids off. So now we have a consistent release time next year where you'll be able to plan for that same time every day. Your student's gonna be dropped off, whereas you could try to get to your kid to the bus stop early and you quickly find out there's just not a bus coming, right? So it's different than a kid being dropped off at an empty home. So yeah, it was and the piece with keeping on Wednesday as well. The group thought perhaps in the future a discussion around a Friday late arrival could occur, but to mitigate as much of the overwhelming change that it could feel like by keeping the day consistent and just changing it to a late arrival. So that's also why Wednesday was selected. Yeah, that's what I got.
So any questions, comments?
Just appreciate that extra clarification. I know I probably will hear in, you know, from parents in the
Yeah.
community. Why did that change happen, and being able to give some of the really good reasons that you for that
Yeah.
will help people understand, because that change does impact families, right?
Yep, and I guess another piece too that you might hear is some folks have asked questions like, you know, why couldn't we combine those later rounds early releases into one day off altogether? Because the state has not only hour requirements for students, they also have day requirements for students. So that we could have perhaps done that. It would have impacted our instructional time. It also would have come at a cost of paying people, right? The purpose of this is to embed it in their paid workday. So we have that, you know, that's high leverage time and needed time. And that's was very clear as we heard from the staff that is desirable time. But with the financial situation we're in, to try to embed it in their workday was most important.
So if there aren't any
I've
further
got some
questions.
concerns.
Okay, go ahead. Ed.
Well, I think it's an improvement.
Mhm.
I guess my understanding of the origin of, I guess what was the late or the early dismissal was, it was kind of a COVID era negotiation between our former superintendent and the teachers to try and get people to come back to
Okay.
work.
I thought it predated that.
I was in that last bargain where this was established, and this was bargained. Ian, you're gonna have to help me a little bit. I think we ended up settling in May of 2021, I believe.
That sounds
Okay.
about
So what I'm getting at is the majority of the workforce was already back. So I can tell you that's not what I recall. But we were already back in person at that time, in May of 2021.
You were back in person at that time,
Yeah,
and this was part.
this was
of that.
implemented in, I believe, in August of 2021, I believe.
And weren't you back in session in September in 21?
Yeah, I mean, we started the school year back
Yeah.
normal, back to reality.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess even so, you know, we're still taking an hour and a half from students, give to planning, and we've been doing this for how many years?
This was the third year that we've done it, so we're coming up on next year will be year 4.
Okay, I mean, my thought is, if we're gonna do something like that, it should be pretty obvious that it works, we have results. But we don't have that. So we know that instruction time correlates with learning, right? That's why we have school. But in my mind, if we're gonna take away 90 minutes of learning time and move it to training, it should be more than obvious. It should be like a slam dunk. Like, oh, this totally makes sense. We have all these results, but we've been doing this for 3 years and we don't have that. So I don't know why we would continue to.
Yeah, I think, you know, I can understand the line of thinking there. I can tell you that, you know, obviously those that are the adults in this that are, you know, utilizing this time, they will say that it is helpful and it is supportive. But I see what you mean with, you know, our graduation rate hasn't increased since we instituted this. But I think it's important to look at different measures and look at the students, the challenges they're coming out of, right? I think it's hard to measure coming out of what we came out of. You know, and I think, you know, I think a 3-year window is still a pretty small window for the amount of challenge that was faced during the COVID closures and then coming back from that. So, you know, I think, like I said, the data that we hear that is positive is from the employees, which again is answering an adult issue. I understand that, but I think as a former teacher myself that worked in the schedule that had an early release once a week, that was valuable time to work with my colleagues. And if you walk around and you see our teachers, they are engaging in honest hard work and collaboration with their colleagues to support students. And I, you know, I understand the concern about the loss of instructional time. But I think, you know, the state has requirements and we're meeting those requirements. And I think, if the correlation as far as, instructional time and success, it is clearly linked, and the state would increase their requirements, I would imagine. And we are surpassing the requirements, not by much, but, we are meeting the state letter of the law with that.
So let me add a little bit more. I think the district is getting more focused on school improvement and initiatives that will have direct impacts in the classroom. Bridge is leading a lot of this work right now with our principals and their staffs around their school improvement plans. So they're looking at that now, looking at data, bringing that back. There'll be calendar out throughout the year. And I have confidence that our principals will be leading that work, looking at data, looking at school initiatives, look at their professional learning that will have impact. So I have hope and confidence that there's going to be an impact, just because I think I see a narrowing of focus around students in the classroom.
Right. But I can certainly appreciate our administration team supporting our principals and our teachers. I think that's great. I just think this might be an example of where the school board has to be the bad guy and say, no, we're not going to do that, because we don't have the results associated with that. Just tough, but
I would comment on that, Ed.
yeah.
And you might recall in one of our school visits, I believe we were speaking with Troy, but we were talking about the time frame that it takes to see results when you implement any kind of new program or change in educational setting. And 3 years is really a minimum for the data collection that you would need to start to see those results. It takes time for the teachers to implement that change and start to see how they're going to make it work with their curriculum, right? So the kinds of professional development that's happening during that time frame, we might not see results for a couple more years. It's sort of like when you start a new business, right? And you need time to get in the black, right? It's a similar concept. We're making an investment, and I would encourage us to not only wait for a little bit more time to see those results, but also to be mindful of the measures that we're using. And graduation rate is one measure, but there might be other indicators prior to that change and improvement is shifting and happening. And if we only look at that graduation rate, we're going to miss some of those earlier indicators and nuances that are telling us that we actually are going in the right direction. We could end up, turning course away from something that actually could be very beneficial, and we just need to wait a little longer to see the results right out. And I said I had 2 points, I should have 3. Teachers, in my experience as a teacher, learn best from other teachers and seeing what their colleagues are doing, because their colleagues have, so the credibility to say, look what I did in my classroom and it's working. And other teachers want to hear that and try it too. It's more inspirational than a book or a presentation, and that collaborative work is very valuable for the quality of the instruction that our students get. And so we might lose 90 minutes, but if the quality of the instruction improves, I still think it's a good bet. And I would encourage us to hang on just a little longer if we can.
Okay.
Yeah. Just saying.
I do think, I think in regard to what you're saying, it is valuable and would be valuable looking forward for the board to receive a report on specifically how the time is spent, including what, whatever, whether it's data, whatever makes sense as far as presentation, so that we understand more clearly, and also maybe if we can embed a little bit of looking at how this time is used in our school visits, I think we can better understand. From a general standpoint, I understand the value of collaboration. I've watched over the years the growth away from teachers closing their door and teaching whatever to working with their colleagues and Danielle expressed that teachers learn best from each other, and we have a number of master teachers who then help their colleagues become that themselves. So I think that, but Ed's, you're right that I think we haven't looked at the use of this specific time so that we understand it. I think from a process standpoint, because major things that we do, such as setting the calendar, are a bit like navigating with the Titanic. We do need, so if the board wants to, sort of, we need to have a process if we want to redirect those kind of major things, so that what I would suggest as a process is start by having a request going forward that we get a report on what is done and how that, with a description of whether it's data or whatever is the best way of presenting it, of how that is useful and cost effective. I do support the idea of embedding the collaboration within the work, within the already paid time, because we used to do more extra days. We can't afford those. We really can't. We don't. What's an extra day cost now? I used to figure it was 90,000, but let's.
I wrote it down somewhere. Let me. 240.
But anyway, it's a significant amount of money.
It's about 240,000.
240 million. So yeah, so that shows you from, if we're going to do the collaboration, we have to embed it in our current salaried time. You'd have to look at, you'd have to lay off more than 2 teachers to get an extra day. And so we just can't do that, but we can't operate without collaboration either. So I think that's helping the board understand precisely, get a much better picture of how this is used and where it plays, what part it plays in the children's education, I think is vital going forward. So I would support the work of calendar, and the other thing that might be brought back in the future to the calendar is adding the possibility of adding 1 or 2 parents to the committee, just as a voice. I mean, I understand it's the decision, the recommendation is in whether it's an advisory role or whatever, so that there's that conversation with all of the parties. I think
You
having.
could add some students, but I can tell you what they'll vote for.
Well,
Yeah, we had some students fill out the survey and they actually asked for like a 4-day week or like
Yeah, right.
a 4-week winter break.
Yeah.
I don't think I would go that far personally. I think those, that the setting the calendar is primarily a negotiation with unions. So I don't want to have us drift off into some other space, but I think being able to bring in that voice, at least as a reminder. So, okay, as you're balancing these various things, how does this impact parents? And I think, you mentioned that, you've got the dual role of parent and teacher, and certainly that's the case. But it's more of an acknowledgement of the parents more than anything as a partner in their child's education that I think that we might at least consider that something to bring back to the process. As a board, we didn't give any different marching orders. And the calendar committee is a lengthy time. So I think from a process standpoint, if we were to change the rules, we would have to do that a long enough time in advance.
Is the bargaining the main driver here?
The description of embedded release time is, the language from that is derived from the teacher's contract, yes.
Right. So I guess my recommendation is to approve this and continue to think, how do we approach this in the future and make sure that we're all understanding what it is we're accomplishing. And within the context of bargaining. So it's keeping all those balls in the air at the same time.
I do think a board ask of reporting on what that time is used for and asking folks to try to start linking it to its efficacy.
Mhm.
That's gonna support that professional development also.
Yeah.
Right, that it may feel like a little bit of extra work, but it's actually going to help the teachers track and see that what they're doing is working. And so that then they can make course corrections. So I would absolutely support that recommendation going forward. Yeah.
Other thoughts, comments?
I think yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys said, and I do understand the loss of the hour and a half, but I also think that 3 years to see improvement from what we've overcome is not necessarily enough time. And that's what my understanding was, it was because of bargaining and it was because of money. And another thing some of the feedback I got from other people was that it would allow students to stay and participate in sports on Wednesday. Like a lot of students were missing out on sports days because of having to go home early. So I thought that was, I didn't even think about that other stuff. So thank you for bringing it up.
Sorry, I forgot that part. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
no, I thought
Yeah.
about that too.
Yeah,
It's
I forgot that was. one of
not
the big
leaving
pieces.
that time gap.
Yes, that
Yeah.
was actually one of the main,
That's
one of the big drivers. So-
As they say, idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm in favor of seeing it through and following up on it. And what Russ said about if we wanted them to do something else, we should have told, because they've been working on this, all year?
Not all years.
It starts,
Yeah, I mean, it's been a few months and,
yeah,
and again, it's the marching orders would actually would predate the calendar committee. It would be within bargaining parameters, quite frankly.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
like we missed the boat.
Well, I mentioned it before.
Yeah. Yeah,
Same thing, right?
Right, no.
Yeah, no, I made my opinion pretty clear on that last time.
which is what led to, this was the first time we sent out a survey to families about the calendar, and we did that twice.
Because bargaining's not over till when?
I mean, I think
Until there's agreement.
Yeah.
Good
We
luck.
do have an executive session for update on bargaining later.
Okay.
So if there's no further questions, comments, entertain a motion.
Motion to approve 24-25 calendar.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm against.
Thank you.
thanks.
And yeah, thank you, Ed, for your comments, because I think that helps us craft where we're and make sure that what we're doing, we're paying attention to it.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Next up, Phil, the health clinic agreement.
Yeah,
The
the
background.
MOU that you've seen versions of it. This is the latest version that we've been working with CMAR and with our attorneys to get it right. This is for CMAR to operate in the school as the provider. It's an agreement for us, the Mount Baker School District, to offer space. So we're offering space, and in that space, they will be providing services to our students. And if you want to see what those services are, it's on page 10 in the MOU. We've gone back and forth with them. Brian has picked up a major portion of this meeting with Ally and CMAR and the others involved with this. The county did pass earlier their $95,000 to help with any capital improvements we need to make. At this time, the clinic would be in the area in the main office in the high school, and hoping to look at, that's a temporary placement for now. And then depending on how that goes and how much space they need, we'll look at space later in the year, next year. So this is the MOU to have them operate in the school. We have to have this agreement, and that's where we're at.
So any questions, comments?
I have a couple questions. So I was reading through and there seems to be maybe, and maybe you can help clarify this for me, Bill, but there seems to be some differing language in different parts of the MOU about the dispensing of medication. So for instance, on page 2, so that would be section 1 and then 1.4C, the very last sentence, C, no prescription drugs will be dispensed at the clinic. But then later, hold on here. There's a whole section on where prescription drugs or how they will be stored. And that was a bit confusing to me. If there aren't going to be prescription drugs in the clinic, why does the MOU need to explain how they're going to be stored? I'll see if I can find you a page for that.
Prescription drugs, or there is something about over-the-counter drugs.
There was a part about dispensing medication on page 10 is the services provided, and it might be helpful to clarify that that's over the counter because it wasn't actually expressly stated. I had to think, go, oh, this must be over the counter. Let's see if I can find the part that was talking about the. Hold on here. Oh, so on page 11. On page 11, number 4, prescription drugs will be stored or dispensed at the clinic in alignment with Washington state requirements, so forth. And so I just, wondered if that might be something that we need to just clean up a little bit for alignment's sake or for clarity. Because it definitely got me going, well, wait a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing we've done, Danielle, in the past on this sort of situation is have the board authorize the superintendent to rectify or reconcile, in this case, the language between those two.
Yep.
If we've set if we set the parameters, we have the understanding that this clause or that clause is going to be the operative clause. Right. Then if the superintendent can then work with the provider so we approve the resolution and then the superintendent, I believe, signs the agreement.
Yeah, I'd refer back to the bullet point on page 10, the pharmaceuticals are prescribed and patient family is referred to a community pharmacy.
Yeah.
So that clarifies the prescription part of it, but I'll follow up with that you talked about around prescription drugs here and the stored and dispensed. I think that's number 4 on page 11.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yeah, I think.
Is that, is
It
that,
says big
Yeah.
picture where we're at. So we
what's that?
I just want to make sure I understand big picture where we're at. We've approved this clinic and now we're just talking about policy with regards to it.
This isn't policy, this is the contract with the provider.
This is
So
the
we've
process.
done the policy stuff separate, I think, but this just what we're approving is a resolution authorizing the superintendent to enter into the actual contract with CMAR.
Okay.
So they can use our space.
So, yeah, so we have, this is essential for that relationship.
For them to use our space, we want to make sure that they have insurance, there's an them, all that.
Yeah, and the contract protects us as much as it protects them.
Yeah.
I don't have real strong feelings about this one way or the other because it doesn't have anything to do with student learning or our core mission. I know I'm going to be super annoyed if we have people coming in complaining about the clinic, complaining about anything related to it, taking our time and effort and energy away from what we should be focused on. So even though we could say, we don't operate it, we don't have anything to do with it, it's on our site. If people, anything, their kid, something happens, who knows, they're angry, they're upset, we're gonna be here listening to these things, and it's gonna take away from what we should be focused on.
But if this document does protect us from that, right?
I know we're protected legally,
Right.
but time and effort and energy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things that people could come and complain to us about that aren't related to student learning. That's just part of being on the board.
Right, but why
That's
would
why
we
we're here.
introduce something extra to just another target?
Because it's helpful to the students and it's helpful to the community.
Well, I understand that there is an argument for it. I just think that there is a risk as well.
Yeah,
Right, so.
I think the benefit for student learning is time. In that, there's two aspects to time. It's time for the student and it's also time for the parent. Because if a parent has to bring their child into town for an appointment, they've got to take a day off of work. I mean, I would have to because I usually work so far away that I'd have to take the whole day off. If I had a half-hour appointment in town and I had a child, if my wife couldn't have brought them. And so I think, there's time for the parent, but it's also time for the student because they're not going into town and back. So it's a reduction. And also because of that barrier of time, parents are much more likely to say, yeah, it's probably not that bad. Let's not do anything about it. And so I think in putting off care, sometimes the problem gets worse. And so I think there are aspects of it that do improve student learning, and mostly that time issue.
I would argue that the mental health support that will be provided in addition to physical health, if you don't have those things, it's hard to focus on learning. It's just like if our kids are hungry, it's gonna be hard to focus on that. If our kids are having extreme anxiety and there's a mental health person here that's trained to the highest level in a clinic that can prescribe what might be helpful, right? That helps that student be able to get back into the classroom more quickly and be ready to focus and learn. If I'm sick, right? The same concept. So I see it as absolutely supporting academics because it's making sure that our students have what they need to be ready and able to focus on their learning, right? Because learning is one of those, you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Right.
Learning is higher up the hierarchy, and if you don't have those basic needs in place, you can't focus on that stuff. So I think that's a piece of it, for sure.
Other thoughts? So if there's no other thoughts or questions, entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-24-19. Oh, no, Mount Health, I'm one ahead.
You are.
Health clinic agreement.
Yes.
With the provision that the superintendent will, or authorizing the superintendent to clarify and correct the language.
Motion to approve health clinic agreement with pending language adjustment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next step, now we're at Mount Baker Resolution 23-24-19. Resolution authorizing the interfund loan and giving authority to the superintendent to manage it. So, Phil?
So this has been several months in the making, and it's good news for us. So finance director, you've been doing a lot of work around this. The good news is that there's money in capital projects in that area, so we can make this interfund transfer to ourselves, and we pay back ourselves. The other good news is that our budget is trending in the more positive direction, and we're not going to have to take the loan out with the county. So this helps us with that, and it helps us put us on the first part of our plan moving into next year. So it'll help us get through the summer months into September. Then we have the apportionment advance to move on from there. But I think we need to do this to get through the next few months, and then we'll pay it back and start over. So I want to thank Brian for putting all this together. He's working really hard on this. Getting a lot of help from the ESD 189, Lisa and Lori and Larry over there, but especially our friends down in OSPAT, and I say friends because they've been working really well with us. They're pleased with where the position that we're in, with the steps that we've taken. And I've heard through the grapevine, through other friends of mine out there, that they're happy with where Mount Baker is moving to around their budget. And some other districts, they're not so happy.
Mhm.
So I would encourage you to pass this approve this resolution so we can move forward with our budgeting process.
And I also remind the board that the revenue source is accumulated timber revenue, not the voter approved capital projects
right.
levy. So, and also important for me is that after we're finished using it for a loan, the revenue goes back into the same fund. So we're not using up the money. We're just borrowing it for that period of time, when we actually need it to balance our expense and revenue. So, any further questions or comments? If not, I entertain a motion to approve Mount Baker Resolution 23-24-19.
Motion to approve Mount Baker Resolution 23-24-19. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So the next item is board discussion and budget. I thought that we would have just we'll have Director of Finance report, and we can ask questions there, but a more of a general discussion on the budget. And I was hoping that, and I think I had sent you an email of either you or Brian or both beginning by framing the big picture of the budget, so that we can kind of have some takeoff point there. So,
Yeah, I'd like to bring Brian up on that, but while he's coming up, we can talk a little bit about what we've done. So we've reduced expenditures tremendously. And you saw the bottom line, over $3.5 million this year that we're cutting out. And then when you look at the worksheet that Brian had provided to us for you to look at, you can look over that. One of our goals was to stop the bleeding, and we stopped the bleeding. We're going to come in a little bit positive going into next year, and that positive includes interloan funds. So I want to make sure that we understand that part of it. A couple of items I'd like you to consider talking about that we need some direction with is the after-school hours and the after-school bus. Right now, I think it's 4 days a week. We're paying teachers for after-school hours tutoring, and there would be an impact on student learning if those were reduced. And if it completely gone, I think the bus is about $70,000, and I think the after-school hours pay for our teachers is a little over $20,000. So that's what we're looking at there. And what we've tried to do with the budgeting process is stay as far away from the classroom as we can, although it has hit the classroom. So our junior high and high school master schedules looking pretty good. They have some elevated class sizes, but they're able to offer a comprehensive master schedule, especially at the high school. And they did a nice job with that. Elementaries, we're still looking at enrollment numbers, especially around kindergarten. We know I have a pretty good idea where the 1 through 6 grades are going to be. It's pretty consistent there, but the wild card is the kindergarten enrollment. So if kindergarten enrollment comes in the way we think we're going to come in, then we might have to add a couple of teachers to hit that K-3 compliance piece. But we don't want to do anything until we know where the enrollment's there, because if we do, and I've been in this position before in the past where we did add teachers and then the enrollment didn't come in and then we were in trouble. So just need to wait and see. And it's hard for people to hear that. It's hard to wait and see when they're trying to put their programs together in their schools. I get that, I understand that. I've sat in those chairs, but to be financially prudent with what we're doing, that's just a strategy that we have to do. Did I miss anything?
I think just so back to a bigger picture, if you look over the last several years, the board has passed budgets at a deficit level several years in a row, and that was a problem. That caused the fund balance to go down to the point where we're at now with the budget you passed and we all worked on in July, led to a projected deficit of 1.175 million. We think we're doing better than that. So it's not actually going to be as bad as that projection was. But what we've done in the budget that's presented to you or will be presented for approval next month, but it will be discussed now, is fix that problem. So this budget does not fix the problem of the deficit that we carry, whatever that deficit ends up being, whether it's 1.175 million or 900,000. We're not fixing that problem with this budget, but what we are fixing is the hole in the hull that was leaking, right? We have some bailing to do, but we're fixing the leak. And that was a heavy lift with lots of hard decisions. And it will be challenging, like Phil said, to stick to that plan. But that's what we were able to do this year. So even without interfund loans, we're bringing in more revenue than expenditures going out for the plan that you'll hear and see today.
So I guess looking down the road, so that we were looking at where we would end for the next school year, and then the budget reductions that we have done so far with the projections of revenue for the following year, what impact would that, unless we make more reductions, neutral, so that we would end approximately the same place, or how do you look at that?
So that's the projection so far, and that is on one of the slides that I can share if you guys want me to. I'm put it up there, but it shows, that next year we'll be gaining about $41,000. And if we want to get to a fund balance of $1.2 million, it takes us 25 years to get there at that rate.
At that rate?
Yes.
Okay.
So that would show that more changes will be necessary in the future. However, the farther out you get from a prediction, the lower the confidence is.
Right.
There are so many variables in that. The first variable being, what is the actual fund balance, ending fund balance going to be for this year? Because those estimates vary wildly, and we still have some grants out there that could impact that greatly. But we won't know that until later. We won't receive that funding until later, so it's not counted in as real until that happens. Last month I presented that we'd only received $12,000 in timber revenue. Well, last month we received another 12, and we still see logging trucks going down there with that red dot on the back. So I'm expecting more, and I'm expecting that valve to open up. And you'll again see that in the budget. It's still a very conservative estimate, But that may open up and that may be another viable revenue stream like it has been in the past. And we also did start with a very conservative enrollment estimate. So 10 kids more that come into maybe a new program, or we don't lose as many as we thought we would. Our annual average FTE is higher than we expected by 10 kids. That's another $100,000, right? That's another pretty major difference. So, and on top of that, we're going into a long legislative session where there is lots of momentum to make some changes. We had a state senator, Sharon Shoemake, that was here on campus today and toured two of our elementary schools. So they're responding, they're listening, they hear a call for action, and they're coming specifically to Mount Baker. So to project the fund balance at the end of next school year, right now I would predict it's flat. Because based on what I know, that's.
Yeah, I think if we just carry forward that's what I was asking, if we carry forward our numbers, because I realize all these other things that could impact, you don't count your chickens until you hatch.
You're talking about the funding, you would count as flat?
The ending fund balance. So I'll just pull it up here so everybody can see it, if they're watching at home as well, 'cause I know I gave you guys the handout, let's let it be public. Because I believe what is being asked is what is the fund balance? Right, so you don't see a major change from 23-24 to 24-25. Our revenues and expenditures are roughly even, but they're more revenues than expenditures, but it's not solving the problem of the fact that that line is below zero and flatline.
Okay.
It's just not going.
It's just no.
It's not going down anymore. It's like we've plugged the leak, but we've got bailing to do.
Does this meet the terms of our binding conditions?
Excellent question. This does not, but we did have a very good meeting, our third quarterly check-in with OSPI and that team. And they were amenable to amending our binding conditions to match what we have been able to accomplish.
Okay.
They have been very pleased with the work that we've been doing. They've been good partners and they feel that we have been good partners, acting in good faith to solve the problem. They realized not only was it a large and multi-year problem that we're working to fix now and it will take a longer fix, but they're also realizing that the loss of 3% of regionalization is very impactful. So
for myself, for approving a budget, I'm gonna wanna see how it fits in with our meeting our binding conditions long term.
yes. So that's actually a topic of discussion I have with Lisa Matthews tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We're going to talk about what to discuss with OSPI in the creation of those new binding conditions. They sent a draft to her that she shared with me just in talking about what's reasonable. But OSPI does at this point expect us to be in binding conditions for the full 3 years necessary. At the end of those 3 years, we don't necessarily need to have met all the conditions, but we need to have a plan to get out. So that buys us more time, and they do not expect us to go into financial oversight, which is something they're talking about with other districts in the state. So we have made adequate progress to satisfy them in the meetings. What's on paper right now, we're not meeting, but they do want to help us be successful, and if that means changing those goalposts, which they've done already for us, they seem willing to do it again.
Right.
That's not to say that it will be easy, because we will still have to get to a point of not only sustainability, like we have now, but of having a healthy fund balance. And that's going to be continuing challenging work.
Right, so I think I'm saying meet the terms of our binding conditions, but that's synonymous with having a healthy fund balance as well. It's the same
Yes.
thing, so it's not like different goals.
Yes.
And how far in advance do you feel like you can look, because if we're talking about extending things, then it puts more work on you for forecasting and trying to understand how far in the future are you comfortable? I know things get fuzzier the further you go out, but.
Yeah. Even with this budget, there's more understanding and work to do in some of the things, specifically food service, which is a new program with the community eligible provisions. So it's mysterious even to those who are working more closely in it. So that's something I'm still working to understand. I spend a lot of time making projections, and a lot of times mistrusting my projections. And Lisa Matthews has been doing excellent work to then match those projections and do her own. Right, she's really been a wonderful partner in this. Because what I'm starting to see, I'm not quite sure if it's right, and then she'll do it and she'll see it'll be a little different, but in the same ballpark and region. So right now I'm comfortable sharing that. We will certainly be doing a lot better than the 1.175 million at the end. But again, with a significant amount of funding still up in the air between now and August, which is when we receive that safety net funding. I mean, that's a potential swing of $600,000.
Right.
Yeah, Ian did a great job of finding and writing some of those grants, and they're still hanging out there. So
Yeah, no, I know there's variables, and I guess all we can ask is just the best principles and best practices in determining what that fund balance is going to be at the end of the next couple of school years.
yes, so I will be required to do a 4-year budget. So that will happen after we create the 1-year budget.
I see.
There will be a 4-year forecast. Now, the confidence in that 4-year forecast is laughably low. And OSPI knows that, but the legislature requires it, so I will do my best. But
At least we can see some good progress for this upcoming.
absolutely,
And I think that's where we need to focus our energy, is that we can only control what we can control. So what our budget is that we're presenting today, is what we know. And I talked earlier about, a couple months ago, we can't live on hope, we can't live on ifs, we can only live on what we know. So when we know our enrollment comes in, then that's a positive. When we know our safety net dollars come in, that's positive. So I think this is a worst case scenario budget right now. It's very conservative. But I think we're gonna see some positive aspects to it later this summer.
I would agree with that. It's starting from a conservative enrollment estimate, which makes the entire budget a fairly conservative guess. And then there are more conservative numbers in there that give us room where if staffing changes happen or are deemed to be necessary, then we have some places in here where we could still reasonably increase the revenue, because the revenues are all estimated at very low. Reasonable levels, but the lower end of that reasonable spectrum. So if we were to move some of them around, we could still stay within that reasonable range and increase the revenue, which, right now is enough to get us to a minor positive.
I think, one of the primary factors here in setting the budget is we're looking at our target reduction, and we're reducing expenditures in relation to that target reduction. With all the other balls in the air, that's one thing that we can be certain of is you make a particular reduction, let's say, of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. It's that reduction is actual dollars going that we can predict otherwise would have gone out. And I think that's really the most solid thing that we can do. That's the most solid approach, because those other things are reasonable estimates, but that's what they are. Whereas the actual reductions are actual reductions. So I think we're doing those both at the same time, but I do think having this longer glide pathway is very critical for our students. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I wouldn't want to have loans. I mean, I don't have any loans. I wouldn't want to have loans. I would like to take care of everything at once, but we have to think of it in terms of what is the experience of our students. They only get one crack at each grade that they're in. And I think one thing that's very heartening to me is that with all the cuts we've made, we're looking forward to next year, our high school program is still pretty much largely intact. And I think we can feel very proud of that. I was actually worried about some of those major things that we might end up having to take away from the kids. And I think so the part that is most important is that the student's experience is basically what they could have expected, that they saw their older brothers or sisters go through and counted on doing that themselves. And we're taking all the work behind the scenes to reduce expenses without the kids hopefully knowing very much about it. And I think that's gotta be, from my standpoint, it has to be one of our major goals. Because, like I say, they only get one, but you don't take away sports, drama, art, music, all those things without, they'll never get another chance to be in high school. And that's, to me, vital. I mean, that's our role as leaders, is protect them as much as we can from the negative fallout. So I'm very pleased with that. And I think transition to K, if we can make that work as a budget neutral thing, our community, those particular children, our community as a whole will be better off for it. And if we can, I think you've done the calculations, if we can have 17 children, it cost wise, it's a wash. But benefit to the education, it's a major benefit to those children and their families. The two questions that you're posing in particular, I'd like to have some discussion of is and they're both part of the same discussion, is the after school program. I would like you to be a little more specific on what the question that we're trying to judge, because some after school bus, there's uses for homework help and there's uses for athletic programs or other programs. So what part are we talking about? What days are we talking about? What are the issues that we're really?
So right now it's 4 days a week, and you're right, it's athletics, students that need rides home. Athletics, it's clubs, it's homework club 4 days a week, after hours they call it. So and that comes out of the transportation budget. So we're looking at that piece. Do we continue with 4 days a week? Do we scale it down and maybe it's 2 days a week? Maybe we start with 2 days a week and see where we end up going. But this is what I'm personally wrestling with, is we don't want to limit kids' experiences and have direct impacts on their school, right? Grades. So we have teachers that are volunteering their time, we're paying them. But it's pretty minimal, less than $25,000. We're getting a big bang. We have a good number of students that are showing up. They're doing their work, getting their grades, getting their credit. It's all of these things that we do to help students, and our teachers are still wanting to do that. So there's a couple of different pieces to this. If a kid wants to turn out for football, but he doesn't have a ride home after practice at 5 o'clock, he's not able to do that. Or girls soccer. And we're helping students in the classroom getting one-on-one tutorial help from their students. So this is what I'm wrestling with. How much of an impact do we really want to have? And it could be positive, could be negative, it could be somewhere in the middle. So I think that's what I'm asking, is to give us some direction on those.
What I heard earlier, discussion around early release Wednesdays is one of the motivating factors to move it to the morning, was to help out with participation in the afternoon. We don't have late bus on Wednesday, so if we then aren't adding late bus to Wednesday, we're not really improving the situation, for part of the reason why we are now moving that from Wednesday afternoon to Wednesday morning. So we want to increase that, especially the junior high. I mean, the senior high kids who drive and whatnot, but really the junior high are the most impacted, because they don't have, their parents are working, they don't know anyone that drives, they're not gonna be able to participate in this. Probably a smaller percentage of kids, but still, I mean, it's just a lost opportunity for that player to miss out on, 20% of their practices. That's gonna have an impact on their how well they do and their interest in it, and everything else.
So the 70,000 is for the activity bus as a whole.
Yeah.
And the usage is homework help and
Yeah.
athletics and other clubs, but that's a total cost. The 20,000 is a separate cost for just the homework help component of it. But so if we're so the primary question really is that activity bus and its role, which.
What is the number? Do we know the number of kids roughly that do it?
So I went in and been in the classroom a couple of times. The classroom was full. Just that classroom was full. There's 25 kids in that area. So if you have the 25 kids and with the students that are active in other programs, it's a significant amount of students. I watched them line up out there getting on the bus. So.
About 65 kids.
I have the data in front of me. It's about average, we took 3 random days in September, October, November of this year. Average right around 55.
There you go.
We run
So
through buses.
combine activity and.
Yeah, we do just how many kiddos on the bus. We do 3 of them as the Acme area, Harmony area, Kendall area. And, just from an equity standpoint, for sure, the Kendall area is the largest ridership, right? Acme's averaging around 15, Harmony's averaging around that same, but Kendall bumps up to averaging around 25. Rightfully so.
So I'd like to clarify something that came up earlier. It is coming out of the transportation budget, but that's an accounting error that we're working to fix. That changed about 2 years ago. The transportation budget is funded by entirely to school and from school for school hours ridership. So the activity bus is extra and there is no extra revenue for it. It's entirely locally funded. So I think that's an important piece to know.
So absent the activity bus, the transportation budget would
Be closer,
be closer to balancing, but it doesn't balance anyway.
not quite yet. There are other changes we're making in that area. But I just wanted to be clear that there's not a budget item that has both revenue and expenditures. It's an entirely expenditure budget item.
The funding source for it is the levy.
Yes.
Correct.
So we do have a community trust issue.
I see. I mean, people voted for levies a lot for those same programs, right? Athletics and whatnot. So I think that should be a priority to help support that.
Yeah, they voted
Make sure
for the
we're
kids
strong in
and
those
sports.
areas.
Yeah, it's. I think, if, as we look through these numbers more closely, we look at changes in our glide path. And what does to sustainability, what does, how does this expenditure impact that? And what are the alternative choices that we have that would also produce $90,000 of savings?
One thing new, speaking with the younger kids not being able to drive, like Lep said, we didn't have a C-team basketball team this year. Those are our kids that can't drive. If we happen to take possibly the transportation for those kids away, we might end up another year without a C team, or in any other sport, possibly losing a C team?
I'm gonna put a little historical context out there, having been a student here a long time ago. And I did play sports, and there was an after-school bus, and we had a punch card, and we paid per ride to have that convenience. I could see some creative thinking where we look at helping to establish, ride share or ways of linking students who need a ride with people who have rides. I could see us doing a punch card system where we reserve some funding for folks who might qualify for help with that. So that we're not making a decision that impacts our most vulnerable populations of students. Because I'm looking at these numbers, I'm hearing what Nick is saying about Kendall. And you gotta go, okay, how many of these 55 kids are riding for convenience and a parent could pick them up, or a parent could afford a punch card, and how many of them really can't? Is there a way to creatively meet this need that our students have? And I'd love to see a little exploration around that. Being mindful that we don't want to lose these opportunities for our students if we can help it. But if it is a place where we can make some savings, it's a burden we have asked the community to carry in the past. It's not necessarily a burden we want to ask them to carry, and we might be more mindful if we do, that we try to mitigate the impact on people who would be most harmed by that, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm not saying that I'm for cutting it, but I'm definitely for some creative thinking around alternative ways of meeting this need, that allow us to also maybe recoup some savings.
I don't wanna take away the bus.
No.
No.
I mean.
Right?
I think, we don't have any figures on, especially now that we've had, we don't get so many free and reduced lunch applications when you get free lunch to all the students. So I think that, so our data wouldn't be very accurate anyway. But I would suspect that those families that don't have the money for an extra car probably more likely falling in that. It's the junior high kids are not, you have money for an extra car, they're not gonna drive anyway, but for the high school kids, that if we're pretty close to this figure with what we would otherwise be supporting if we did free and reduced lunch, we paid. I kind of wonder if our accounting issues and the impact on families is whether we get to the point where it's diminishing returns on a cost savings. But
I know we've talked this before, what is it we get from the state a year for one kid?
That's going down this year. It's about, I think it's 11,500.
Yeah, that's the inflation adjusted number, I think. So it's, when you add the levy in, it's about 15,000, but that includes the levy figure in that. So the state gives about 13,000.
the state is for basic ed only. The
Yeah.
levy is for non-basic ed, which this is an expense. It's a non-basic ed. And we've been using, probably a larger share of the levy for what really should be basic ed expense, and that's the MSOCs.
Yeah.
And the unfunded what I consider basic ed, special ed.
Mhm.
And as Brian pointed out, the transportation deficit that would be there even without this. So we, part of it is, it goes to salaries of what would otherwise be, what probably should more properly be considered basic ed expenditures. So I think, you know, it's, there's lots of threads you're working on at the same time. I don't think that this would be one of the earlier ones I would go at for cost savings personally. But, you know, I think we get down to the point where we're balancing all those things to get to our final numbers, and we see where we're at and whether we need to adjust. But I, as far as a direction in developing the budget, and I think that's what you're asking
That's
for
right.
now, rather than a change in the program. I'm just asking the rest of you, what's your sense of the board
Agree.
as a direction in developing the budget, how to put these numbers together? Do we, would we like to see the budget as, including these, at least our first go round?
I would say yes. The reason I personally asked how much per kid, if we say $50,000, let's say a kid doesn't have after-hour school that's really helping him, and he's not passing classes or something like that, and for some reason I would hope wouldn't, but it said, what's the point, right? You're talking 2 kids, you have already paid for the $20,000 that we would be, that we're paying for it. And so
Yeah.
that, at that point, that's not worth it, right? So. My thought.
Well, I think your point's well made in that the 20,000, so the expenses, is really the transportation.
Yeah.
The 20,000 to get a kid to pass is, you know, I think your point is very well made, in that's really the core of our work.
Mhm. I say we go with it and keep it in there, and see if we can work. That's me.
So I guess you know, I'm hearing, that's what I'm hearing.
Yep,
So
we
that's
hear
the
you.
answer
Thank
to that. I think the other, on, you know, the management issue, really of kindergarten enrollment, waiting to hire additional teachers if necessary. I think that's just good practice. I think we've, in past years, I remember one year, years ago, when I was on the, you know, earlier on my term on the board, we ended up contracting 4 teachers than we actually, 4 more teachers than we actually needed to cover. So we were paying 4 I mean, we found stuff for them to do, but that's the kind of thing you can't afford. You can, as hard as it is to shuffle around classrooms at the beginning of the school year, in our budget condition, that's far better than having an extra kindergarten teacher that we found out that we didn't actually really truly need.
Well, maybe they can just give students rides home.
What's that?
Maybe they can just give students rides home.
We have to CDL training.
No, I'm like in this car.
They have to get there.
Policy though, with low ed top, so.
They'd have to get their CDL. So any other thoughts on that part?
No, what's next?
Huh?
What's next?
That's pretty much it, as far as what you were looking for feedback. I think I think we do have a bargaining update, and those are, you know, commingled concerns there, so, but that's later. So I think next is our Director of Finance report. So you've given us parts of it, so.
All right, should we start with a look at the budget?
Yeah.
So for any public listening, this document will be posted to the website and linked in my finance bulletin when it comes out. But this is a pretty high level detailed look at the budget. So we'll go through this and we'll talk about some of the changes. We'll talk about some of the variables that are in there, broken down in a few more ways, and then we can come back to this at the end after you have a better understanding of it. So the lighter color on the left is the current budget year that we're in. The middle column is the proposed budget for 24-25 school year. And on the right side is the difference between the two. So if you look at the top enrollment, it's pretty clear. 1536 was the budget. 1448 is the budget for next year. Difference of 88. Fund balance here. This, again, we're starting with the fund balance that was budgeted because that's what we have. We don't have a new estimate yet. We have some guesses, but we don't have anything that's solid and real. So starting by just going down, property tax and timber excise tax, you'll see the levy, we have a little bit less revenue collection, even though that inflationary factor goes up. If enrollment does indeed go down to 1448, we will collect $5,158 less dollars in the levy next year. Timber excise is just staying constant. That's been a constant budget number for a while there. The next section, the 2000 series tuitions and fees. You'll see there's a major decrease in tuitions and fees because we don't take as many of those anymore. But there's an increase in sale of goods. And that's specifically some of the student industries work that we're doing in the CTE program. And then the other major difference there is in gifts and donations. And that's because there is which one is it? A grant from the ESD for nurses that lives in that budget line item right now. And I don't believe it should. So I'll probably move it out and I'll probably adjust that budget, but that money will go somewhere else. Right now it's there. So I put it in there and that's why there's a difference in that line. The rest of the 2000 series until the bottom stays pretty clear. E-rate is also a wild card. $45,000 estimated for this year. We've got more than that already. We have plans. We have plans to run new fiber optics here that will be a cost of up to $75,000, but we'll get a rebate of all but 14 of that. And that's just one project. We have several other small projects going on as well, but it's a matter of timing. So if we do those in the summer, when do the funds come in? So $65,000 is a pretty conservative, I think, low estimate based on what I know we've got going on. We'll either get the funding this year or next year. But to put in the budget for next year is $65,000. Anything that comes in extra this year is just bonus and extra this year. But the timing of those reimbursements is also a little weird. And when we report to the federal government, even if we receive the money next year because we applied for it this year, we put it on this year's budget.
So is that a capital expense, a fiber?
So E-rate is a state program and it's general fund. Though there is capital projects E-rate money in emergency connectivity funds, and that's how we bought all of our Chromebooks. So that was capital projects. These projects we're looking at in the general fund. So that's the difference there, and I do think that's one of those places that's a really low number.
So
right?
you couldn't build it as a capital project and then accept the money as an operating budget?
No. I like what you're thinking, but no. But that, again, to highlight that, that's one of the items in there that's it's higher than last year, but it's still a very low estimate based on what I think is realistic that we will collect. All right. So moving on down, you see apportionment is lower. That's entirely student enrollment driven. Special ed is higher, and that's part of the legislative action that was taken this year. Timber revenue, even 250 is a very conservative estimate for Mount Baker, but with the pause that was on, that didn't come in. 150 is a more conservative estimate, and with the pause off, I think that's a good one, but I'm open to opinions on that. I'd be surprised if we don't exceed that next year. Holly Kuhn did some excellent analysis of the timber sales that were upcoming and where the funding would come from, and it's still a real wild card to predict. who's going to do what.
I did talk with Chris Hankey from local DNR about coming to one of our school board meetings to sort of chart out what they predict for their state forest timber sales over the next, period of time that they're predicting, and I think that would, we can invite him and hopefully get that fairly soon. I think in terms of whether the timber sales are going to be subject to a new pause or not. And we're trying to train the Whatcom County Council to kind of shy away from pauses, but if, depending on the age of the harvested timber, they're either more or less likely to be subject to a pause. The older stands get a lot of negative, support or opposition to and the younger stands, the same amount of money harvested out of the younger stand doesn't generate the opposition, so more likely to come in.
All right, any more questions about that so far? We're down at the past the 3,000 series into the 4,000 series, which is the state special purpose. Again, a lot of these numbers are driven by enrollment. So there's another increase in the special education, which is a benefit to us, a decrease in LAP. Highly capable and, yes, transitional bilingual are almost a rollover, and that's based on the current grants that we have. So there was a bit of a change since the budget in those allocations. So that's based on current allocations. Going down further, this is where school food services gets kind of wild. So when I did an initial estimate on this, I looked at it, and this is food service, that's the state food service, and then here's the federal food service at 853. So I got both of those numbers fairly conservatively from apportionment and annualizing estimates. Lisa Matthews looked at it again. So my total number is, about $200,000 less than hers. He's frank. So there's a pretty wide margin in those two numbers. And because the CEP program is fairly new, it's hard to say what's what. There's some money in there that's still ESSER funded. And I haven't heard that the state has a plan to fund it differently than ESSER, but I have heard their commitment to continue funding it. Also, if we have a few fewer kids, we'll give out a few fewer meals, and then we'll get a little bit smaller reimbursement. So those numbers are on the low side for now. But again, do give us some wiggle room to, if we have staffing changes that come up out of necessity, we can say, well, reasonably, we could estimate more in specifically the federal school services. But that kind of hopefully helps explain the difference there between those two numbers, because it is quite a significant difference. Transportation operations. The funding mechanism for that is different than any other funding mechanism in school systems. It lags a year behind. So essentially at about January in the year, they look at your current operations and your last year operations. And if your current operations are more than last year, they pay you what you spent last year. And if your current operations are less than what you what you did last year, they pay you the lesser amount. So if you've made cuts in transportation, they pay you the lesser amount. So when they pay you 1 year behind, they tell you that you're fully funded, but the funding lacks by an entire year. So next year, not anticipating our funding or not anticipating our expenditures in transportation to go down. And again, that doesn't include the late bus. That's our current number. So if we spend more than that, we still get that much back. And if we spend less than that, we get less than that back. So I would encourage us to spend more than that and get that much back. But the funding lags by a year. That's where that number comes. All right. Please feel free to stop me with any questions as we go through this as we go. Impact aid. This again is one of those very conservative guesses. there was a gap in that grant. So we did not collect that grant for the 22-23 school year. We got it for the 23-24 school year. The 125 number, I don't know where Steve got it. It's a federal program and they're not transparent, but I don't know that they know their funding all that well in advance. Because part of the way that it works is they guess a reasonable payment for quarterly payments and then they pay it to you, but then the last one is usually a lot larger because their reasonable estimate is low because they're not sure where their funding is coming in. Currently already this year, we've received over $200,000. We will receive another payment, which should be our largest. So I'm estimating we will receive about $260,000. Ian worked very closely with Sherry Reynolds, who is new in her position, but doing very well to catch up on all the work that Ken did. And she was able to actually, work with Ian and the tribes and find a few more kids than we had before. So even though enrollment is going down, we have more kids qualifying for impact aid, which is for the impact of non-taxed federal land that's tribally controlled. And so the federal government pays us because we don't get tax base on that. So that is an estimate that I put the estimate together and I said, I really don't know. So I took up $100,000. It's entirely arbitrary, but safe. Sorry, best I can do. All right, so federal forests, down.
Yeah, last I heard, and I was just looking it up now, Secure Rural Schools Act hasn't been reauthorized.
Okay.
Which we go through that battle every biennium, so, and we usually end up getting it reauthorized, but can't count on it yet.
So is there a 15,000? Would you recommend I remove it?
Well, I think that's almost splits the difference.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
I think you're probably,
Yep. All right, COVID's gone. SPED is going up. Perkins was estimated at 15,000. It came in this year at 35. And the rumor is that it will be reduced by this amount. So this rumor that we're acting and budgeting on there. Title I is an actual allocation that's been released from the state. That's the state allocation model that they give us for Title I. They have not released allocations for the other titles. Since Title I went up, it's reasonable to think that they would be the same or up a little bit. There are rumors that it might be going down, but not in any significant sense, I think. We talked about school food service already. Again, we're budgeted for $900,000 this year. Last year, we collected $941,000, and this year we're estimated to collect $1,001,000 some odd. So that's a very safe estimate. All right. Continuing down, Indian education is a grant that's difficult to spend. So we estimate we could probably spend 1,000, maybe a little more, but 20,000 is probably a safe estimate. Medicaid reimbursements, I looked at this one. I'm going to put in my notes here, sorry. Medicaid reimbursement, there was something about this one. Okay, so that's about our current collection is higher than this. Our current collection is about $83,000. So 50 was the budget and the budget's rolled over here, but also in that same funding group, there's $70,000 for the Walker County Health Mental Health Grant. So that number could reasonably go up by 70,000. That's money that actually we have already invoiced for. We just haven't received. So at the time that I was putting the budget together, it wasn't in there. I didn't include it. So that's again a spot where there's probably a little bit of wiggle room. Commodities are just the leftover food. It counts as revenue at the end of the year. This is capacity largely. So we did get a Career Connect grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I say we, by we, I mean Todd, Toby, and Matt over at the high school. That funds the career college counselor over there. They did some excellent work to get that funded. So there's a matching expense for 192,000 of that, and that's the career counselor and her program. The other 110,000 is capacity that has a match in expenditures. So that's just in case we get other grants, we have capacity to receive and spend that money. If we don't put that in, we don't have authority as a board. You don't have the authority to either receive or spend that money. So capacity is built in, but it's matched. So it doesn't change the bottom line overall. Transfers at 250, that's again the procedural transfer from capital project to the general fund. 250 is about the average of what Ben was able to get out of there. It wasn't done last year, so it was by 453. So that's a guess on what we could pull out of capital. There is some salary in there and then other things like technology purchases and subscriptions. All right, so questions on revenue before I go on? I know it's a lot and we'll look at it a few different ways later as well. Okay. So you've got payroll, benefits, and accounts payable. And it's broken down that way to be understandable. I will say that in accounts payable, that includes all of our contracted services. So if we contract for a nurse, for example, or if we contract for drivers, or if we contract for any maintenance or repairs that are done, those come out of accounts payable. So there is some still human cost out of there, but not salaried costs. Those are executive contracts. The number there is based on going through the budget line by line and looking at everything we spent this year and everything that was encumbered this year and leaving it there largely. There were a lot of places actually where there was a cost that was put in the budget and said, you know, $50,000 for contracted services for my department. Had never been accessed, but it had been there for years and lived there. I've removed some of those that were never accessed and not reasonable to then start up in this year with everything happening this year. So interestingly enough, when I went back and did a much more detailed analysis, you see the difference there. We're expecting to spend $161,000 more next year. You think about inflation, and that's probably not reasonable. My best estimate for what we're actually going to spend in that category this year is only $4,797,891. So if that was the actual for this year, then the difference between actual and budgeted is over $1.5 million, which I do think is much more reasonable with inflation and other costs that are coming and funding not really increasing. That's much more reasonable. And again, gives us some wiggle room in that to say, you know, we've tightened our belts and we've, you know, made some difference there. And the budgeted cost of $6.1 million is actually going to end up being more like 4.8. So
in this year's budget.
This year's budget. Yep. And again, that's a guess. The year's not over. Costs are still coming in. But that's when I took, to get to that number, I took all of the costs that have happened so far. I took the costs from mid-May to the end of year last year. I annualized that by an extra 5% of inflation. And then I took this amount minus the difference in the annualized amount and got to the 497.
So does that mean our budgeted ending fund balance will be that much less?
There's a potential. There's a potential for that to be. There are also some things in there that are different than last year. We actually were paying our community college bills for Running Stars. Well, in the check run that will be approved tonight, or was approved in the consent agenda. So that's a major expense that I think was a little bit later last year, but is included there. We worked with the risk pool is to, instead of pay a lump sum in advance, to kind of pay that out as we go. So that's factored in here, but there.
If I'm understanding what you're saying, if that's an extra 1.5 million, that makes the difference between being negative and being positive.
If that was the only difference.
If that was the only difference.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because you'll find differences elsewhere where revenue hasn't come in as expected, or expenditures have gone up based on you know, student need and hiring. So
Right.
yes, you'd be understanding that correctly, but that's not the only difference in budgeted versus actual.
Okay.
But it is an area that gives us a lot of confidence that the budgeted ending fund balance will be higher than what was projected.
Is the figure in the dark blue, in the middle there on accounts payable, that you've adjusted, because I saw in your other budget summary on MSOCs, almost $200,000 increase in the 24-25 year in utilities insurance combined, like 190, 180, 190.
Yeah.
So is that reflected in that 6.3?
It is.
6.3, okay.
Yep. Yes, that is included in that accounts payable line. everything we spend except for payroll costs and benefits is included in that accounts payable.
And you've got those numbers, you got a pretty good handle on, that we see those coming down the pipe.
Yeah, those actual expenditures, yes, we can look at it for this year and then add an inflationary cost. Yep. And compare it to previous years and again, watch that cost. And yeah, so those we're feeling pretty good about. That number is more about things that we put in the budget in case we have to spend it, right? It's a contract service for parking lot repaving. You know, if we have to do that, then that's there. That's a cost that's in the budget that we may not actually realize, but there's those contracted services in there. So
How do you? It's kind of a loaded question. How do you feel about having our revenue and expenses so close next year? I mean, is that what the best we can hope for?
as I said, it's changed a little bit since we did this. And I've looked at some of the other numbers where they were very conservative guesses, and it's about the same, but it's about 39 now. I feel.
Wait, what's 39?
Sorry, about 30, the 41,000, like, and I haven't officially worked it up yet, but there were some changes that came up after I printed this, even just today.
Right.
So, I mean, how do I feel about that number? If, well, first bad, but if we look at what we predicted from last year, right, a budget deficit of $1.175 million, and what I think we will actually accomplish and how much better that number will be. And then we're looking at, okay, at least now we've plugged the leak. We're forecasting to have more come in than go out. And if we stick to the plan and keep the belt tight, you know, that number could go up.
Yeah.
So.
I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
expecting to see a trajectory, right, of
Yes.
how we build the fund balance and.
Well, it shows it going down so much right now, and it's flat on the graph. It's like,
Yeah.
we wanna see it go like that, and I think that's what he's meaning, like, we're here, now we gotta bail, and whether we do the same things we've been doing this year to keep us flat, like, that'll bring us up with the budget that we're projected to do now.
Correct. And so if we're looking at a difference this year of, you know, well, say you take that number, you have $4.8 million and say that's what we actually spent this year. Sure. So you add a little bit to that, say it's 5.3, right? We really stick to the plan, and this number is, and I want to be clear that this is entirely conjecture at this point.
This isn't going on the website.
No,
This is
it
just
is,
playing
I'm
around
about
with
to
the
press
numbers.
Control Z and it will go
We
back.
are,
This is
yeah.
entirely conjecture, right? But if we accomplish about the same, you know, mitigation this year as we did last year, that number goes up significantly, right? So, how do I feel about this number? Not good, but as a starting place to stick with the plan, continue tightening where we can, and really know that we have some bailing to do. I think what I feel really good about is if you look at the number in light blue, and that's the revenue over expenditures predicted for this current fiscal year. That's a bad number. That number is better. And that took a lot of hard work, tough decisions, and challenges for everybody on all levels of the system to get there. So that I can feel good about. Do I feel good about the actual number? No. But that we feel.
Well, I think though that's what, if we keep those things intact, that's a sustainable baseline. We just have to add to it now the dollars involved with getting our fund balance back to 1.2 or whatever we're gonna shoot for. And that we will look at those options of how to achieve that, but it's less than what we've had to do this year in terms of the dollars cut looking forward. So it's narrowing down what we need to do going forward.
And for the discussion of what's necessary for next year, I would encourage us to actually look at that after the year end books are closed and we have a better sense of this is what we actually accomplished in the 23-24 school year. This is now the challenge we face and the scope of that challenge, because that may change significantly. We know what the scope was in this budget. And now we know going forward, we've mitigated that, but we don't know the scope of our next challenge.
And that's the hard part right now, because the end of the year books, when we close them, it's end of October, early November. So that's the patience factor we have to hang on to see what actually did we do.
Yep, and what enrollment comes in at, and you know, then it's past January to see what the state legislature may do. So there's those factors again, but that's a long answer to your question, how I feel about the number.
Yeah,
Did it
okay.
get about what?
Yeah.
You get a good answer there?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry, I
appreciate
didn't
that.
want to move on until,
Yeah, no, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay,
I read through this before, you know, and I really appreciate the format that you've used here, because I think this is probably in the years that I've been on the board, probably the clearest fund by fund budget presentation that I've looked at.
well, thank you. I have the benefit of not being, I had the benefit, I think, of coming in from a different perspective than being a finance person, right? So that I can do this and think, how does it make sense to me? And then it also probably makes more sense to more people. But thank you, I appreciate that. So we'll look at it a few different ways, and then we'll come back to this maybe, unless there's more questions before we move on. So here's a summary of the revenue in the budget. You see the table on the left drives the graph on the right, and that, you know, a bulk of our funding by far comes from the state. And that's where, you know, Senator Shoemake was out here today. That was awesome to have her. They're listening, and if we continue our advocacy, I think we have some real hope to be heard. The expenditure summary, we'll do this a few different ways. And if anybody is doing the math, the reason that the total here is different than the total elsewhere is that these debits and credits are not included. And that's an accounting mechanism where if basketball goes on a trip, it's charged to transportation. And then there's a debit and a credit to charge it to basketball, and then it becomes revenue for transportation. So those are removed because they're accounting mechanisms more than real expenditures, but there's the expenditure breakdown now.
What are the colors? Is there more? Is there a key?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My apologies. You gotta guess. So, certificated salary in the dark blue, classified salary in the lighter blue, contracted services and travel. Those two go together. There was pretty minimal travel, but those were our contracted contractors that work for us. You see supplies and operating in the yellow is a pretty small portion of the budget. And then classified salary in orange. Capital outlay is the one you can't even see up there. $40,000 in case we need to, you know, put in some more of these foam tiles, right? So, things like that. All right. This one just gives a sense of that we're a human business, right? We teach kids, and it takes people to do that effectively. So 81% of our budget is estimated to be human cost. And again, some of the orange is contracted nurses, contracted counselors, contracted health specialists, contracted OTs. So there is even some people in that remaining 19%. This is one I always love. Blue is projected. So this is a table that you're probably familiar with at this point. The funding, is at $640,000. If you look at our insurance cost, it gives us $38,000 to pay our utility bills for the year. We paid $41,000 to PSE this month.
Where's the $38,000?
If you take the funded cost at 640,677 and you subtract the insurance cost at 573,816, you get about $38,000 left to pay all of our utility bills.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's actually going to cost 736.
Turn down the heat, in other words.
And I'm assuming you
It's
showed this
1.2.
table to Senator Schumer.
I haven't yet. No, not in
Because that
advance of you guys
unfunded-
seeing it.
That unfunded percentage is loud and clear.
Correct.
It is loud and clear what's going on.
Yes.
And that's why we're seeing other districts like Blaine School District, right? They're at a 2.5 deficit right now, and maybe we hit the iceberg first.
They have the
But
same problem.
they're not far behind, and when you start to see that pattern emerging, that's telling you that this is a state funding problem.
Yep.
And this is not just a local problem. Have you had a chance to connect with any colleagues in Blaine or any of the other schools that are starting to hit the iceberg, so to speak?
I currently have no colleague in Blaine
Oh my God.
because they don't have a director of finance there anymore. But I have connected with her, yes,
Yeah.
and they are facing the same challenge. And you're right in thinking that it's the systemic problem that everybody is cutting. And our lawmakers are hearing that, not just from me, but from everybody. Everybody is coming in together, and so are the organizations like WASA, WASDA, AWSP coming in and saying, this is the problem. You've got to make it right.
And I've talked with a lot of superintendents, and all the superintendents, we're pretty tight up here in Whatcom County. Everybody's seeing problems. A lot of districts are going in financial distress. Blaine hit it. Cedar Woolley's got a little bit going on. Even the larger school district, you see what's happening down in North Shore and Seattle and Evergreen. It's just all over, and it's the same story. Enrollment, MSOCs, staffing cost, it's the same story. So,
I mean, you just not that many years ago, right?
no,
19%.
Yeah.
Was not funded, and now 51%. That's a huge
Yeah.
cut in support from the state that we're trying to make up locally, really through cuts.
Yep.
I mean, that's how we're making it up. It's not, and I think that's so important in our advocacy, but also for our community to understand that this isn't us spending more and more and more on new things.
No, this is non-discretionary spending.
Yes.
We can't not spend that money.
these are fixed costs, and just think about it a little bit more. So when you're looking at that $600,000 figure unfunded amount, compared to what our overall budget is, it's about 2% of our budget. And we're looking at a 4% to get back into good
Yeah,
graces
right.
with the
Yeah,
OCI.
it's
Right.
So,
It's getting up close to half of our necessary increase to get the fund balance.
Correct.
Right, and a typical
And-
fund balance is like 5%, right? So you're saying, okay,
So if they funded this for 2 years, we'd be there.
we'd be there.
We'd be there.
Right, so that's where the fund balance went, is to cover,
I'm just
Unfunded
curious,
costs, yeah.
yes.
do we have a feel for how our utilities cost per square foot of buildings compares with other school districts? I'm not seeing metric.
I do not.
Just, I don't know. It's a big number. In addition to knowing that we are underfunded, I'm just curious if we're kind of on par with.
What
is
Yep, and that one might be a little more challenging because in other school districts, like if you take Blaine as a comparison, they have one centralized campus and fewer buildings. So their cost is probably a little less,
I think,
And they must be all natural gas.
maybe.
Well, their
They-
campus is,
Huh?
their campus is brand new practically,
Yeah.
so they've got all the energy efficiencies.
Yeah.
No.
So I could try to look for some comparables, but that
I
would be.
mean,
I'll have to
Nooksack
look
has
farther
3
and
elementary
wider.
schools and.
Yeah.
It might be.
I'll reach out to Nooksack.
You
They're good
asked that
partners.
question before, Ed. I mean, when we were on our school visits in very good weather, there were a lot of doors and windows open, and you had pointed that out, and I don't mean to say that it's any particular people at fault, but that there may be efficiencies that we could gain in other ways.
Okay. Yeah, appreciate the conversation. And to your earlier question, I certainly will share this with legislators. But I wanted the board to see it first. I don't want to jump the gun and share things that aren't shared with you and with the public before I go and share them, but you can be sure they will get this in their inbox.
When I was first on the board, our annual insurance cost was 90,000, giving the same coverage
And for
with
similar
fewer
numbers.
students now.
Yes, I was gonna say. I mean, that, to me, that enrollment number is. That just keeps going down and down, and we, there's not a lot of wiggle room here if we're trying to dig ourselves out of this hole, and that number just keeps going down. It worries me, and you've done such hard work and made such difficult cuts. That has to weigh on your minds too, I'm sure.
It's one of the main messages that I've been giving to our legislators when I have the chance to talk to them. And I would encourage you guys to as well. But the analogy you use is you take a school like, well, any of our schools really, you take Kendall Elementary School. And you could take 10 kids out of that school. And the state will take $150,000 away from us. But there is no change in the operation of that building. Even if all 10 of those kids come from the same grade level, you still don't close the classroom. You still have the same human cost. Those people are on contract anyway. You're still heating and lighting the building. You still have insurance. There is no change to the operating cost, but there is a major hit to funding. So that funding model just doesn't make sense.
Well, and the prototypical school model is developed for urban and suburban locations, where if you don't have enough children for a 400 student elementary school, you just combine two of them because they're only 2 miles away.
Yeah, we talked about that today, Senator.
We don't have that option.
Yeah. We actually drove her from Acme all the way to Kendall while we were talking about it.
Yeah, right.
That's brilliant.
Ride bikes
right
from
there.
Acme to
Oh,
Kendall
I
while
love
you're
that.
talking about it.
Well, then you should drive them from Glen Haven to Cedar Woolley and say, where do you think the kids are gonna go when they don't have access?
Right. Or you think about the after-school bus, we have no city bus
Right.
that circulates around the kids. can
And
jump
no
on.
safe walking routes.
No safe walking, yeah,
All right, so this I wanted to put together because this again just showcases the hard work that we've done already and the progress we've made, right? So you're looking at revenue in blue, expenditures in orange. It matches the graph. The light one on the right is the projection, but you can see that there were several years in a row where expenditures were significantly higher than revenues, and that caused a problem. And we're in it now, and we have not fixed the deficit. We have not fixed the deficit that we will carry, but we have fixed the problem that caused the root cause of the problem.
And you can use this little bit of a larger analysis. If you go back and look at 18-19, when was the last year that we're in the positive period? So you could see over the last several years what happened.
and you overlay that with the funding, the decrease of funding that we were just looking at previous, right? 19% unfunded now to 50%, 51% unfunded, right? And so it's just telling that same story.
All right, and when you already saw, we talked about it.
Lessons learned as well.
Yes.
I want to see a couple of years past that.
Yeah.
Where
We can't end with that. Come on.
I could plug it in right now for you, but it won't be real.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
no.
you're doing with your 4-year budget. projection.
November's not that far away, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we see how far this actually drops, and I will be putting together a 4-year balance for your budget.
And these last two graphs have showed it with the student enrollment we chose to go with.
Yes.
So if we have student enrollment 20, 30, 40, 50 more than what we budgeted, we are gonna see more.
Yes, and I would caution that we do have
Well,
to,
we budgeted lower with the number, right? We went to 48
48.
instead of what we haven't seen those numbers in the ones we budgeted, we've been below that before we even started the school year.
That's true.
Correct.
So,
That's true, but that trend line has been going down.
Yep.
For a long.
I think the enrollment estimate is absolutely reasonable, and to your point, Jason, that's absolutely right. If we see enrollment come in higher, that's great, and that's a great way to build the fund balance, as long as we stick to the plan.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The minute we say, well, we have 50 more kids, we need to hire more people,
then we're, yeah.
we don't realize that gain,
Mm.
and that will be challenging. But
gonna
as,
be covered, yeah.
If there will be pressures and pressure points, and you just need to do this.
all right, what are your further questions? I'll go back to the summary page, have it there, and this was shared with you guys. I believe it's on board docs as well. It will be shared with the public. Though I might put a watermark draft on it, because like I said, things
Yeah,
are
I
still
think you
moving.
better have
Let me write that down.
a big black draft.
Yes. Before it goes out.
You know, Brian, as you took us through each of these and you were sort of pointing out, this one is tentative, this one is no, and this one is tentative, this one is no. I think that's really helpful information so that we can kind of see what percentage of this is still up in the air.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Does.
And I don't want to add extra work to your plate, but it would be helpful visually to even just highlight some of those areas that are either highlight the unknowns or the knowns if they're whichever category is fewer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think that helps us see visually how tentative, right?
So
These
what
numbers
I'm
are.
happy to share with the board, that doesn't create any extra work, whoops, are my notes.
Ah.
I hid them so that it looked nicer. But I can share this with you guys as well. And this just shows where the numbers come from. It's a conservative estimate. Or if it comes from the F203, which is a report of the anticipated revenue, here's the estimate and what it currently is, right? So you see that this is estimated at 1,000, but it's currently much higher. That was just a rollover. These match current. So happy to share this with you with the notes there.
That would be wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
I hid them and printed them so I could see them. But
So you weren't doing all that from memory.
Sure it was.
I even wrote these things down because I know I'm going to forget them. But yeah, happy to
Okay,
share
thank
with you guys in
you.
the live version. All right. So, what I will do is continue to monitor any changes that might happen. And we began bargaining with PSE. We still have a few other contractual things out where we don't have an agreement with MBEA either. But there may be some changes, and if there are major changes to this bottom line where we're gaining about $40,000, the board will hear about it quickly. Otherwise, I will continue with the budgeting process, ensuring that we're about in line with what we discussed today, knowing that there's some wiggle room in some of those numbers. And I will begin to upload into the state system a budget as presented here today. Okay, and I will track changes and you guys will be aware through Phil and Nick, any of those changes that might be happening if they're significant. All right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, and we're well on track. I think might be the first budget done this year. So in the ESD. But Phil wanted it done before he left, and I will endeavor to ensure that happens.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Of course. All right. Now to the other financial report.
You just have 4 more.
I gotta say, the ASB budget looks better than ours.
The junior high has a higher, really good higher. I saw that when they
Yeah.
presented it, I thought, they got a couple $1,000s more than we do.
That's something I have been working on because the reports that they use come from our system and they don't actually match the bank account. So they're aware of that, and when they make their budgets, they're aware that some of that money in there doesn't match. We built it from the bank account now from the system. So that's something the ASB has asked me to present a solution to the problem to them by May 27th.
No,
Not actually solve it, but present a solution to it. Don't have that done yet, but they will get it by the 27th.
They're the boss.
They are, and they did a great job, and the kids were excellent to work with. They were awesome in that. So I didn't put a lot in here knowing that we had a lot else to talk about. So this matches kind of what we talked about earlier. We had our quarterly meeting with OSBI. They're happy with the work we've done. They know that regionalization was a major impact. They do expect us to be in binding conditions for the full 3 years allowed, but they do not expect us to go into financial oversight. They appreciate the partnership as much as we do. And that's why they're willing to work with us to when we go back and we say, you know, TJ, we're not going to make that. We're doing everything we can and we're not going to make that. He says, okay, what can you do? And then we'll change those conditions and give you the extra time you need to get to where you need to be. So there's good partners. Questions? Sorry. No? Okay. Next two are pretty simple. Phil asked how we're doing on levy collection. This was mid-May, so we've probably got more than that now, but we, you know, there's a total expected down below. That's what we got by mid-May. Those tax collections will continue to roll in over the next few months. And there's the capital projects levy expected and what has come in and what is coming in. Here's the legislative priorities. So I won't take the credit for this. This is something that Phil and Nick and I discussed, and I went back and I put my thoughts down on the letterhead, which I don't really love, but it's the letterhead. And then Nick took that and sent it to Katie, who made a nice little flyer about it. And this, our legislators have been getting. It's posted on the website. That's where the link came from. I think it's been linked in some of the communications that went out to the community. But so there's the MSAL cost. Got one? There you go. You like it? Yes. Okay. Talked about the MSAL cost. Talks about an ask to fixing regionalization. All things we've talked about. Increasing the staffing allocation. Instead of increasing the funding amounts, why don't you just allocate the staff that we actually need? And it calls out there that our levy currently funds $2.5 million in unfunded basic ed salaries. And then finally to fully fund special education. And it talks about our shortfall and the cap on funding. So that's what we got. So team effort to put that together. All right. And I believe the board has all received that as well. Okay, questions before I go on to the other reports that you all know and love by now? Okay. Fund balances. The general fund balance looked surprisingly high, and that's where I started down a rabbit hole with some analysis in conjunction with what Lisa Matthew was doing and looking at, you know, that's higher than our estimate. Why is it so much significantly higher than our estimate? Some of that is deferred costs and some of that is food service costs that were impossible to predict, and other things in there as well. So that's the next major item that Lisa and I are going to tackle together, is trying to get a better handle on cash flow analysis. And you'd think that with only a few months left in the year, we'd have a good handle on it, but don't. So that's my next endeavor. Oh, the debt service payment goes out in June. So the next time you see that amount, it will be lower by our LGO payment. And that's the second to last payment we make.
How much of that 2.9 million is money we borrowed from ourselves?
1.08.
1.08.
Yep. So what's going to happen is June is always a short apportionment month anyway. So where typically our apportionment, if it's in a 10% range, it's about 2 million. It's 5% for June and it's 6% for May. Sorry, 5% for May, 6% for June. So July and August are the two big ones because it's the end of the state year, where it's 10 and 12.5. So the state holds 22.5% of our money until after their fiscal year ends, and then they give it to us and they tell us just to get by. They gave us an apportionment this year, so that was kind of them. But that's just how they make their books look better. So what's coming up is instead of getting $2 million from the state in apportionment, we would be getting about 700,000, but also we're gonna start paying them back. So they're gonna take another 500,000 and we're gonna get about 200,000 and we're gonna send out 2 million in payroll. But we're also going to loan ourselves some money. Thank you for passing that resolution.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right. Enrollment ticked up in April, back down in June, sorry, back down in May. And probably will hold relatively steady through the end of the year. Find our way to the top of the revenue. Trying to hold ourselves back from the top of the expenditures. Still have more coming in than going out, but that does include that apportionment in advance. Oh, sorry, this is revenue comparison to last year. Yes, so more coming in this year, but again, that includes the apportionment in advance, so that will likely flop soon. There's the expenditure yearly comparison, comparing last year to this year, spending significantly less this year than last year. Revenue to expenditure, you see the same pattern in October and April, and that's the levy collections. So again, we'll see that significantly shift in June. And then again, when we repay the rest of our apportionment advance in August, that will be a significant shift the other direction. We'll level that out. And then as a line graph, as we asked for. Same information, different presentation.
Ed, there's your positive.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
It's up. We're just gonna call it quits.
Don't make it too high. We don't people are getting crazy.
I like where you're at. Ed. I like where you're at. All right, are there questions about that? I know we covered a lot, or anything else, anything we covered. Is there other questions before I go sit back over there? Okay, of course. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Yep, so I will work on making the budget official for your approval in late July, and you'll know if there are any significant changes to anything that may happen. All right, cool, thanks for your time today.
So, next up, superintendent report.
I'm gonna speed this up.
Sorry.
So real quick, legislative visits, I think they're critical right now to talk with. They're home, they're doing community meetings, they're visiting. Now's the time to talk with them, and that's what we're doing. So I encourage you to get out and make contacts. I'm glad you talked with Greg Dahl the other day.
Yeah, I also talked with Alicia Rule and Alex Ronald.
Yeah, it makes a difference. I talked with Keith Wagner and Eslick last week. So, and they're still part of our 39th down here. So just keep in contact with those guys. So legislative visits. Ed, thanks for bringing the attention to the Parents' Bill of Rights. So I've done kind of a cursory analysis with this. There's 3 or 4 policies we need to keep our eye on right now. WASDA has done their analysis on that. We'll be starting to get some improvements or some revisions from WASDA around policies and things. Most of what we're looking at are things that we're already doing in place. That was the analysis through the attorney Stevens Clay assessment that we've got, but we're keeping an eye on that. The other piece I want us to know a little bit more about is WASA has done, I don't know if you've seen this, Russ, an assessment on the 24 legislative session about new requirements for school districts. So I'll send this to you so you can see it, but some things that they're addressing all around drugs, fentanyl and other substance abuse areas, public school materials, looking at IMC, curriculum, things that we need to do. School districts must include on their instructional materials committee 1 or more parents of enrolled students. So that's a change, but we have had community members on IMC committees before. Others, opioids related information, just giving them data on what's happening around that. There's quite a few. I just highlighted a few here. Per typical school staffing, school districts must use the additional funding to support increased staffing, prevent layoffs or increase salaries. It just kind of narrows it down a little bit. The minutes per day around recess. So school districts must provide a minimum of 30 minutes of daily recess. So these are just things that they've highlighted that we looked at. So there's quite a few. I'll send these to you so you can see what these look like as well.
Are any of those anticipated to require policy changes or just
I
operational?
think these are more operational right now. I haven't, yeah, most of them are just new laws that are operational that are unfunded mandates.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Sorry. School improvement planning, Bridget is still leading that work. And I've said this before, making a calendar, looking at your involvement in the summer around some work sessions, and then calendaring data reviews and checkups later on. Graduation, the 6th. Are you walking with us? If you are, and talk to Tammy, so we can get that in there. But that's about all I had. I just wanted to assure that that we are doing some things around legislative visits, our budget timeline, graduation, school improvement planning, those kinds of things, and these two big ones that are kind of hanging out there that we'll have to keep an eye on, that Parents' Bill of Rights and the new legislative requirements that we're going to have to do. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Thank you. So meeting schedule. In addition to graduation June 6th, an additional question came in if you had a gallon left over from last year. Email back.
Oh, I'll check, nice check.
So check and check your email for that. And if you do or don't, just email back the answer to that. And then I think the other thing that we've talked about, but I don't think we've scheduled, and Ed, you reminded me, I think it was the June 17th, that we talked about maybe having a joint school board admin team meeting. So has that?
We have a principals meeting scheduled for the 17th, and we can do that early in the morning.
So I wanted to ask, so the purpose of this was to sort of, as we transition to new interim superintendent and in our leadership transition, giving it, we wanted to throw it out to the rest of the board, giving an opportunity to have at least part of that meeting jointly. So that, and then with the idea that that Bill and Nick can help us sort of flesh out what might be the most productive things to cover in that joint portion of the meeting. But is that, so what is the?
So we're scheduled in the morning, beginning I think at 8 o'clock, and trying to wrap things up about noon. We have quite a few things to just put on the principal's plate for them to think about over the summer. And then when they return in August, there'll be some tasks for them to do. Get ready for school.
I guess what I was hoping was that our principals and cabinet can meet with Nick and ask him about his goals and how we're gonna get through the year, and ask questions and just kind of have almost like a kickoff type thing in the transition of that leadership, so that they can ask their questions and he can share his vision, and we're just kind of going into this another challenging year with everyone kind of together and on the same page.
So time-wise, would that fit in for your meeting if you had 8 to 12?
I mean, I'm looking to bring together something more kind of co-facilitating. And I think, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's two parts to it, right? I think it's definitely a good idea to come together. I think part of the work that's going to be happening is that planning and that visioning. and Nick is a part of that. So I think during that time, which is basically tomorrow for our principals, because they'll just be closing up their schools, I'm not too sure if at that time it's going to be the best to have the vision conversation. I think it's a good conversation to have, but maybe not necessarily a plan moving immediately in place. I think that might be a really good August kickoff, so to speak.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I mean, whatever the timing looks like prior to next school year, as long as everyone can make it. You know, all of you guys as a cabinet and principals, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I'd be fine with covering this, this area in August as opposed to June, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, that works for me. I mean, that's, I think ahead of it, especially just understanding exactly what my deliverable will be that day, what the request is. I mean, I hear a little bit about that, but it still seems somewhat theoretical. So like, is there a delivered product as an outcome of this? Yeah, I guess that's what my clarification will be going into it. But yeah, I think waiting till August is fine.
That'll also give us a bit more opportunity to sort of flesh out what are some of the elements we want to include.
Right, and as Phil talked about, the school improvement plans and those coalescing and having more connection with the strategic plan, they're connected already, but really making those authentic, that's the work that principals are doing with their schools right now. And that's the work that we'll be doing in June when we come together for admin meetings, as well as again on June 17th, is really looking at the priorities and the needs for each school so that professional development can be aligned and really facilitated on those early release, late arrival days.
Right.
So a lot of building blocks and foundational work that will be happening over the course of the next 2 months.
Okay.
So I think in August, that will be part of that deliverable. You'll be able to see that scope and sequence.
Okay. Cool.
The other thing we talked about in terms of the school improvement plan is a district, or the action plan, district-wide, which is another step, that we have to do, but so would that be part of that by August discussion?
It would definitely be part of it. As we know, school improvement plans are they're not static, right?
Right.
So as we're beginning to do the planning, right, in June, we're reviewing, we understand the alignment, the need. That's a June work. In August, when leadership teams come together, that's when they'll be focused on their comprehensive needs assessment and reviewing the data from this year and developing their plans for the year. So you'll get, a cursory view, and then you'll see that as it rolls out over the course of of September.
Later in the year, yeah. Good. Well, we can keep this on the planning level now then. So for executive session, we have
Sorry, I guess the only other reason I was hoping would be in June so that Phil could be there.
And that's what I was just thinking.
Maybe. He did offer to do some mentoring.
mentoring
From time to time.
not mentoring to the school board, mentoring the interim superintendent.
Yes. Well, that was the only other thought.
What would you? So. Back to the executive session, we have 2 items, one personnel item and one bargaining update, and no decisions to be made afterwards. I think they should take, how long do you think the bargaining update will be?
Not too long. I think we should probably do bargaining first.
Okay.
And not much more than 15 minutes.
The
Have we been in
personnel,
executive session with us before?
But if we put a time on it and a limit, then
I'm gonna say 30 minutes total between the two.
I think that's about right.
It's good that you're smiling. Okay, so
Tammy, can you put another pot of coffee on?
There's still plenty of cake.
Yeah, everybody has to eat cake before you leave.
Yeah.
Serve it.
if we could quickly sign any documents and then.
Ending.
Yeah, let's make sure we turn the.
And,